Tennis star Novak Djokovic was seen on a tennis court in Melbourne, Australia today. That was made possible by the events just hours earlier inside a Melbourne courtroom. A judge overturned the government's decision to cancel Djokovic's visa over coronavirus vaccination requirements. Australian Open organizers granted the tennis star a medical exemption from the vaccination, which immigration officials refused to recognize. Today, a judge ruled that was wrong. Jubilant supporters have been celebrating, but this may not be the final serve. The government is now considering whether to cancel the Serbian's visa for different reasons.
They were so happy that their hero is free for now, they mobbed any car, even if they couldn't be 100% sure Novak Djokovic was inside. Outside his lawyer's office, they celebrated into the night. Some were pepper sprayed in the chaos. Outside court too, Djokovic's supporters cheered the decision to overturn his visa being canceled.
I love him, and yeah, he's doing a good job.
I'd like to thank the Australian government for creating the global hero in Novak Djokovic. So thank you. It backfired, didn't it?
The judge ordered Djokovic's release from immigration detention, calling the Australian government's decision unreasonable. He ruled that Djokovic hadn't been given enough time to respond to that decision. The Serbian had arrived in Australia believing he had a medical exemption to rules requiring a coronavirus vaccine. This, it emerged, was due to a December 16th COVID-19 infection. But the Australian government argued that exemption didn't apply to people entering the country from overseas. That contradicted what Djokovic had been told by Tennis Australia, the tournament organizers.
I'm not going to blame anyone. The conflicting information and the contradictory information that you receive is because of the changing environment. We are in a very challenging environment for everyone that's been involved in this process.
Djokovic tweeted that he was pleased and grateful with the decision after the court's ruling, going on to say he's now focused on the tournament. But the saga is not over yet. The Australian government can still cancel Djokovic's visa on the grounds of public health. For now, though, Djokovic's family is thrilled with the rather atypical victory.
For me, this is the biggest victory in his career, bigger than all his Grand Slams.
Winning on the court is second nature to Djokovic. Winning in court, however, has proved a lot harder.
All right, let's pull in Alex Gruskin. He's editor-in-chief of the online site Cracked Racquets, covering all levels of tennis. His podcast is called The Mini Break. He joins us from Indianapolis in the U.S. Alex, good to see you again. So do you agree with Mother Djokovic when she says that this win in court is her son's greatest victory?
Well, I suppose at least it's still a court, so that may count for something, but I think the most unfortunate part of this situation, and you guys did such an eloquent job laying it out there, is that Djokovic has taken on the symbol of political martyr. And there are so many fantastic things to explore about Novak Djokovic playing in Australia. The fact that he's pursuing career Grand Slam number 21, which would set the record on the men's side. The fact that Novak Djokovic at this continued age, I believe he turns 35 this May, continues to play near the peak of his performance. There's so much to celebrate on court. Unfortunately, we can't because as you guys demonstrated and as we saw last night in Australia, there are those who took this decision as an excuse, we'll say, to go to the streets. And unfortunately, police had to deploy pepper spray last night to break up a crowd. I would disagree. I think there are moments on the court Djokovic has looked far more impressive than this victory in the courtroom. That said, I understand the sentiment.
Well, what about the Australian Open organization? I mean, they're the ones who actually have rules that allow for exemptions in the middle of a pandemic, when in a country that has had the strictest restrictions in the world. Shouldn't they be blamed for this, this migration, visa, PR disaster?
You are starting to understand tennis quite well, my friend. I would 1000% echo that sentiment. And look, Craig Tiley, who is the director of the Australian Open, the bigwig at Tennis Australia, he has done an immense job about making the Australian Open as accommodating as possible for players. There is no doubt he overstepped his boundaries on this one, overextended. And the key question so many of us are asking is, what exactly did Craig Tiley tell Novak Djokovic? Because, of course, the most obvious solution, the most commonly repeated solution, would have been for Djokovic to get vaccinated. Now, if he was told by Craig Tiley, I have spoken with the Australian government, we have clarified what is, what isn't allowed, your case is going to be an exception, then you can understand Djokovic's confoundment with his entire situation. So absolutely, I think there are people in Tennis Australia who have to be held accountable, and I anticipate those questions will continue to be asked over the course of the next few weeks.
Yeah, and the Australian government right now has mud on its face, if you will. Novak Djokovic, he probably will get a cool reception if he does end up playing, but it doesn't change the fact, though, that because of this, everyone in the world is going to be watching it when he walks onto that court. That's going to make a lot of money for the Australian Open, isn't it?
Well, that's exactly what Craig Tiley was counting on with Novak Djokovic's inclusion into this event. And again, it's always worth prefacing, he is chasing history. That is something all tennis fans will gravitate towards, that pursuit of his 21st Grand Slam. That said, and I apologize for repeating myself, I mentioned this last time, a tennis tournament should never compromise public health. And I do think, unfortunately, that's the perception of the Australian Open now, particularly within the Australian community who have to be vaccinated to attend this event. The hypocrisy of that ruling in itself, that an Australian to attend the Australian Open has to be vaccinated, but we're making this grand exception for a player who doesn't have to worry about the things that, daily Australians are going through day in, day out, has been able to maintain some sort of comfort. I think that's hypocrisy. That hypocrisy is what, again, keeps people talking about this story and why, unfortunately, it's probably not going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, I think you're right about that as well. Alex Gruskin with the online site Cracked Rackets. That's a great name, Alex. We appreciate your analysis tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.